Buonasera a tutti e benvenuti al nuovo webinar della
Good
serie.
afternoon and welcome to our webinar, BeGood AVIS. I want to remind you that you can follow today's event in Italian from Facebook AVIS page and in English from the YouTube channel. My name is Alice Simonetti. I deal with international and national topics, executive member of National AVIS. Today we're going to talk about reaching self-sufficiency for blood and blood components in Italy at European level, and on the contribution of from the Italian country and from our association to this purpose. It is a very relevant topic that involves us as a European and Italian citizens, and we are fully engaged in a coordinated way at the institutional and organizational level. And we want to thank Honorable Simona Bonafè, Member of the European Parliament, that is very attentive to our initiatives, and I want to give her the floor for her introduction. So, good afternoon. Actually, I want to thank AVIS for organizing this webinar, this important event, for reflecting today with many experts of this field. And I want to remind those following us from Europe that AVIS is one of the most important blood donor associations in the world, voluntary, non-remunerated donors. Today's meeting is aimed at delving into several topics, underlining the importance of blood collection, not only for the medical needs, but also let's not forget that blood components are important also for pharmaceutical purposes. There are different systems and models for blood collection, and today we, as we already said with Mrs. Simonetti, we want to shed some light on the contribution of the Italian system that has its own peculiarities. Also, in the light, which is another important element, in the light of the evolution of the European regulation that is going to be amended by the Commission over the next year. In this framework, there is also a sort of dependency in the European Union in terms of import of blood and blood components. So it is even more important to fill this gap in a European perspective. We know that blood donations are essential to save human lives, and of course, the availability of blood and of blood components depends on the availability of citizens to donate. Therefore, we should never get tired of highlighting and underlining the ethical value of this choice, of this action, and every communication effort that we can make towards this direction, also to underline how the lack of blood availability jeopardizes the whole system, how this system is instrumental to our society, and we need to give value to the contribution of associations such as AVIS and the role they play to create a network of volunteers and a network of people motivated and proactive, not by chance I said motivated, because we had the possibility to see how during the pandemic, also maybe due to the fear of citizens to donate blood, there was a drop in the general availability, but we could also see that when we have well-organized networks and networks of volunteers that are motivated, this affects positively blood procurement and blood provision. This meeting comes after June 14, the Donor Day, a day dedicated to the work of association like AVIS, to the work that they do. But it's also important, it is an important day with a view to the next review of the directive and the guideline. The Commission for 2021 has prepared an amendment to the directive on blood already in 2019, as Van der Spiegel will probably say later. In there was an evaluation of the Commission of the current legislation, but there is no doubt that since 2002 up to date, also after the pandemic, the world has changed, and there is a need to review this directive, which is something compelling. Also, relatedly to the need to update European regulations. European legislation has improved the quality of blood and is going towards a greater safety for donors, but still there are some gaps that we need to fill. Also, in terms of a better harmonization of rules across member states, and in order to update the subject according to scientific research and also after the pandemic. That it has been a challenge for all of us. The pandemic again stressed the importance of not being fully reliant and dependent on the importation of blood and blood components, but I will also extend this topic to medical devices, active principles, medical products. We had the possibility to see how internal procurement is one of the topics on which the European Union needs to make improvements. We know that more than 80% of blood today comes from third countries. The European Commission also, in order to improve the regulation, has opened a debate that was closed on April 15 and has seen the contribution of more than 200 stakeholders. I'm convinced that this will allow the Commission to create a very balanced proposal, a proposal on which we will work as soon as possible at the Commission. I'm a member of the MV Commission that deals with environment and public health. We are co-legislators, so we very much look forward to the contribution of the Commission and to improve, also to improve their proposal according to the guidelines that we have followed in our work. So transparency, traceability, and correct information. So when the proposal arrives, we will be happy to give our contribution, avail ourselves also of the contribution of important associations like AVIS. So I want to thank AVIS again, particularly National President Gian Pietro Briola for making this event possible. And I would give the floor to Alicia to open the round table. Thank you very much. Thank you, Honorable Simona Bonafè. So our objective at the beginning was to find a common ground in different areas, in different realities, according to the present challenges. And now I want to give the floor to Mr. Gianpiero Briola, National AVIS President, to give a focus on the Italian association model, the AVIS model. Thank you, Alicia, thank you to those who are listening. Thank you, Honorable Simona Bonafè, who contributed to organizing this webinar, which we consider highly important because we are an integral part of the European community, and we want to give our contribution on this topic in the best possible way with our policies and our potential, our skills, and with the strength of our organizational models that are not that bad as usually Italians think, but can also give very positive effects. Our model is quite peculiar, ethical, voluntary donation model that is quite generous for a number of reasons, because we think that being associated to an association like ours helps keeping a network between associates, helps making them feel an integral part of the association and involves them in participating when necessary. Also, with a view to improving our system. Our model is quite particular, the Italian one, because by law it recognizes, it acknowledges a contribution value both in the organization and in the programming and in the blood collection and also blood component collection for volunteering association. And we carry out this job nationwide and also with other associations. We collect 45-50% of whole blood nationwide, less in terms of plasma, which is why we're going to discuss a better way to reorganize together our system. Topic is association identity, which is relevant. Our association collects more than 1,300,000 volunteers available for blood donation and plasma donation. But unfortunately, our country is still struggling in terms of plasma donation, and where there is a lack or a limited availability of red blood cells, we tend to act in different ways. We are widespread on the territory and we work for collection and retention and recruitment of donors. Mr. De Angeli will talk about this. We have reached self-sufficiency in terms of red blood cells, although there are some differences at regional levels. In Sardinia, for example, we highly need red blood cells, and this availability is not fulfilled at regional level. In terms of plasma, we achieved 75% of the current needs in our country. A better organization, because we do have donors, but we don't have a network. We should boost our network. In this way, we could achieve 1 million in terms of plasma collection, which would guarantee self-sufficiency in this period on a national level. In Italy, this is a public system pursuant to Law 219/2005, which is a cardinal moment in terms of ethical value and also property of plasma. Blood, a property of public type, which is something very much important and available to all hospitals without the need to without the need to give duties to our citizens. In fact, duties are distributed nationally with the National Blood Center that coordinates the activities of regional blood centers, and establishes the programming of a plasma collection nationwide, giving objectives to all regions and giving goals to all regions, cascade way in order to collect plasma to be given to other parties. Organization is a territory-based organization, and collection is carried out by volunteering organization and private and social sector, always not for profit and without any objectives to make money. And 2020 was a very peculiar year, very tough year in Italy, on my territory, in my area specifically. It was a bit of a concern talking about blood and plasma collection because the pandemic at the beginning had discouraged donors as in other countries, but the availability and sensitivity of our donors led us to results which at the end of the year were quite generous, also unexpectedly, because we only had a 6% drop in whole blood collection, red cell, red blood cells, but mainly related to the lack of structures to collect blood, and also a 2% drop in terms of plasma to be given to the industry, also thanks to the increase of donations in terms of apheresis plasma. 100% more that guaranteed this amount. This says a lot on the availability of our volunteer donors who overcome difficulties and once reorganized with our programming according to COVID safety regulations, came back to donate. So in our model, we want to make agreements with policymakers, also at regional level, and the professionals in the sector, transfusional experts, with the coordination of the National Blood Center to get to a self-sufficiency or even get closer to self-sufficiency of plasma derivative products, self-sufficiency, which over time will be something we'll have to pursue because the increase of consumption is expected to rise over the next few years. So self-sufficiency will have to be reviewed as time goes by. And this is quite a complex topic because to produce plasma-derived products, it takes a long time, takes months. It's not like for red, red blood cells where it takes less time. Production cost will be higher, of course, also in terms of collection, but we do believe that our model can represent a useful and virtuous model also economically to be shared also in other countries. Looking at Europe, a European perspective, if we consider that model, we should look again at a future self-sufficiency, which is possible thanks to European donors that can basically be considered as the sum up of national self-sufficiencies. Because without this concept, and if everyone wants to access the market that has its own rules for purchase of lacking products and lacking drugs, we risk seeing this objective being jeopardized because each market has its own rules. And who is the best offer will achieve better results in that moment. And we also know that the evolution of the world and also certain mechanisms in third countries won't see us in first position also in terms of economic possibilities and commercial possibilities, which is also fair enough because everyone on earth needs to have right to health services. There will always be higher request of plasma and we will have to buy it on the market, a market that is mainly dependent on United States. And there was a high need during the pandemic in terms of plasma, which could represent a problem in the short term future, in the near future. And we believe that the topic of self-sufficiency is fundamental for all of us, is a goal to be reached, not for single states, but for Europe. We need to establish rules that allow us to achieve this goal, rules that are rigid in terms of quality and safety of products, and also rules of transparency with the companies and the industry that produces plasma-derived products through country regulations, because we believe that this is the main direction, the only direction that we have, not to recur to market rules to offer our citizens, our European citizens, the right to health care that is fundamental to all of us. And I want to thank you. Maybe we'll have the opportunity for a short debate later. Thank you, President, for this valuable focus, which will send us to our roundtable, where we will have greatest experts in this field. We have Vincenzo De Angelis, National Blood Center, Francesco Fiorin, Italian Society of Transfusional Medicine and Immunohematology, Gianfranco Massaro, International Federation of Blood Donor Organizations, Stefan van der Spiegel, European Commission, and from the European Commission, Director General of Health, and Lorenzo Montraccio, Human Rights Directorate, Council of Europe. I want to thank all of you for your availability. I will ask you to keep your time into 10 minutes each to give space to each speaker. And I will talk about the national scenario. And thus, I would ask Vincenzo De Angelis to add something to this topic and to ask him maybe which could be the contribution of the National Blood Center to our system, and maybe how can we even progress further by working together. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Avis. Thank you, Honorable Bonafè, for organizing this focus, which seems to be quite relevant. Earlier in the afternoon, we had a meeting in connected to summer emergency in the field of blood collection. And I said that 35 years ago, when I started my career, in July, I was forced to send blood in emergency from Friuli to Catania. And every summer there has been an emergency in summer. It is no longer an emergency then, it is something quite expected. So we are surprised if it doesn't come. The president's introduction is totally agreeable, and one of the main features of the transfusion Italian system is this integrated aspect that we have on our territory: recruitment, utilization, retention, on the whole national territory, also for blood collection and of blood components that, as Mr. Briola said, represents a fundamental element in supporting transfusional activities that needs to be reiterated. In Italy, all of this is public. Only in this way can we guarantee that the right to assist transfusion is guaranteed to Italian citizens homogeneously. And this principle is the non-fractionability of the objective of self-sufficiency. Now, non-fractionability indicates the fact that, at least within the country, self-sufficiency needs to be considered as a overall task of the whole country. And let's not overlook that when we have specific epidemiological situations, like in Sardinia, where there is a high need in terms of plasma that is not acknowledged in the rest of the country. But if the average need in Italy is 40 units of red blood cells, and in Sardinia is 60, there is something to be done. They, of course, they have less possibilities to donate because they are less quantitatively. So there is a need to work together in this sense. In other cases, in other situations, the topic of national coordination is, as we already said, is the promotion of the focus on the satisfaction of needs in critical times, in critical situations. So now we reach self-sufficiency in terms of transfusion in our country, but we hope that in summer we won't hear talking about summer emergencies, and hope that the fundamental work of blood association, recruitment, fidelization, and sending of donor to the association where there is blood collection won't be affected at all during summer. So plasma-wise, it's quite different here. I think that this is even more strategic and complex with respect to red blood cells. As Briola said, if I have a high lack of red blood cells, it takes a couple of days to solve it. With plasma, it's not the same. It can take 9 months, and it's a long time. It's a lot. And there are patients affected by immunodeficiency that are totally reliant on the presence of these drugs. Telling them come back in 9 months, it's not possible. And there is a second topic that involves blood donor association for the specific task that the Italian Association acknowledges to be the promoter of recruitment and sending donors to the association. The fact that the evidence in terms of numbers of plasma collection, we pass from high peaks up to 24 kilos per 1,000 inhabitants plasma designated to industrial to very low, not even 6 kilos for 1,000 inhabitants. There is a gap across regions in terms of quantity of plasma sent to different companies. And this is an extreme difference. This great discrepancy needs to be solved at all costs. In terms of immunoglobulins, this is the most strategic case nowadays. Also, Italian regions who collect a lot of plasma, 25 kilo per 1,000 inhabitants, at the end of the day reach barely the self-sufficiency level. And if on the market there is not the product, those regions can keep up. But those who do 6 kilos per 1,000 inhabitants will be lacking this product. And we need to find a solution today when there isn't still that shortage rather than in a couple of months when there might be an emergency. Let's hope it won't happen, but I can't make any prophecies in this sense. Stefan from the speakers will talk about this, and the European Commission is investing a lot in terms of communication, but also in terms of money. Let's consider Support T project for the collection of immune plasma, that is also part of a wider project for plasma collection in general, also for this great dependency that we have on the US market. So the focus on drugs, and I want to say something more, not to steal time to other speakers. And I would say that this topic can be dealt with only by the public system blood collection, because from a industrial production point of view, some industries can produce up to 5 kilograms of immunoglobulins for each kilogram of plasma work done, and others who produce 4. So between 4 and 5 kilograms, there is a 20% difference, which is not little at all for a strategic element such as immunoglobulin. So the system needs to work on a specific mandate, that is blood collection, of course, but it's also true that industry needs to work on their specific mandate, that is to make available public system the best technology possible in order to give the best production also from a therapeutical point of view. And I would stop here because plasma-wise, we have opened quite a large discussion. So thank you, Mr. Briola. We've been talking a lot about this. In the next few years, this will be the focus on which we will work a lot. And also, we will work also on another plasma-related topic, when for blood donation, models need to be related to voluntary association, non-remunerated association. When it comes to non-financial gain, as Montrati would say, this is more specifically for plasma. And there is a ethical aspect that we need to consider also with regard to the Italian legislation. Thank you a lot, Mr. De Angelis, for this wonderful perspective that you have given, which widened our scenario in a very productive and essential way. So now in Italy, we always say that the transfusional system walks on 3 legs: institutions and health authorities, donor organizations, and professionals. And here I would ask Mr. Fiorin to share his point of view as a professional on the quality of the work carried out so far and on more compelling topics which you think we might focus on in the near future. Thank you, Mr. Simonetti. Thank you, Avis, for inviting me, for the opportunity to hear the perspective of professionals on this topic. You, you anticipated what I wanted to say. a three-leg table. This metaphor, I'm a bit younger, I think, but I was raised with this metaphor. As a young transfusion performer, the role of associations, of institutions, relevant authorities has always been quite clear. They have to be distinct but complementary, each one with its own responsibilities, tasks, and skills, but of course oriented towards the same goal. And one of this is self-sufficiency for blood components and plasma-derived products. In this regard, there is another topic that Honorable Bonafè mentioned at the beginning. The fact that we need in our country, maybe also in European community, we need a transfusional network that permeates the territory and health services because medical transfusional activity is cross-cutting in our health service. There is no area in the health service where transfusional activity is not needed. And this needs to be stressed because the presence of transfusional service are sometimes taken for granted, which is not the case in this moment, not in terms of product availability, nor in this period in terms of professional availability, availability of well-trained and qualified professionals who can carry out the activities of medical transfusion transfusional activities, which is not only collection. Of course, it is an important part of our activity, but it's not the only one. We pass from collection and assistance to donor to activity that are hyper specialized stem cells transplant, advanced therapies, mesenchymal cell use. So now in Italy we are. It is important to create a network, and we should never forget that transfusional medicine is important and needs to be there at all times. Second, second message regarding a problem we've been having for a few years now, that is not easy to be overcome without the involvement of institution and organization. Transfusional medicine suffers the lack of professionals, specialized professionals, because in Italy there is no such training body. There are other specific areas that train specialists who are then trained in terms of transfusions. Since we don't have this type of specialization, not even in medicine, in this study degree, they need to acquire specific skills, also in terms of patient's assistance. And these skills cannot be acquired in a short time. We need a long period of training, study, questioning one's own medical skills in terms of diagnosis. Earlier, Mr. De Angelis said that from plasma, we achieve plasma-derived products within 9 months. To train specifically a profession in this sense, it takes more than 9 months. Our scientific society represents transfusional experts in Italy more than anyone else, with a high number of associate and has always been a linkage in our country. And our effort has always been turned towards our members to improve their skills in this specific sector. But this is not enough. We need to find a solution, a permanent solution to this issue. I myself, hope, I hope that we can create a specialization school for transfusion medicine. This also for plasma-related, derivated products will give its results in 4 years, and we can't wait 4 years. We can wait, nor can our patients. We need to give answers to patients, to JPs who use hemocomponents deriving from our donors, because we feel they are ours. There are many other things that we need to work on seriously, and the example is found in other European realities. We need to give value to other type of personalities, type of profiles that are not medical profiles. As far as the blood donor selection is concerned, donors are by definition healthy people. So we need to orient, we need to target our assistance to them. We are not treating patients with acute diseases. We are dealing with healthy patients in other European realities in Europe and in the world. This duty is entrusted to specialized, specialized nurses, for example, mainly for the supervision of a medical manager that needs to be present in case of discrepancies or problems. Because let's not forget that the safety of our components, blood components, and plasma derivated products starts from an attentive and careful selection of donors. Our laboratory trials made miracles over the last few years. During the 80s or 90s, the problem of infected plasma, you remember that. Now the risk of uh, of transmission of other diseases through plasma is very, very little, and is an acceptable risk for the transfusion of blood. But I think that this, from a regulation point of view, but not only from an organizational point of view, we need to consider alternative solutions for the donor selection, alternative solution to doctors and JPs who will be left with their very tasks, like the ability to carry out diagnosis and treatment. This is the biggest issue that the transfusional Italian system has in this moment in terms of professionals. But I don't think it's a problem that can be solved now. Maybe in the next few years, and I'm sure that we will find a solution over the next few years. Think we will do that thanks to the effort of the three legs of our system. We need professionals, we need donors, because of course we need their contribution from this point of view, and we need institutions. We need coordination, not only of the National Blood Center, of the Health Ministry, Research Ministry. We need to find a solution to this issue because I can't stress this enough. We can't take for granted that transfusional services are always there, that operators in transfusional services are always there. and are always qualified, and that we have an adequate availability of blood components of and of plasma-derived products. On this topic with De Angelis and Briola, we talked a lot, but the system needs to be capable of staying there, but it can't do that without professionals. This is just to sum up my main ideas, which I wanted to share with all of you today. So I thank you very much once again for inviting me, for giving me the opportunity to participate. Maybe we will discuss further later. Thank you very much, Mr. Fiorin, for your important observations. It's not only the activity of transfusion, the interest of our efforts, but also the availability of adequate professionals who can carry out the services. And now we would like to know more as to the works of our colleagues abroad Italy. And I would ask Gianfranco Massaro, what is the field's vision for the next challenges awaiting us? Thank you very much for inviting me. I accepted your invitation, Alice, eagerly, because this program has a very interesting topic, and you are invited to a next webinar that we will organize with the OMS, and we will talk about plasma, because I think that the European challenge is plasma. And the WHO is organizing a webinar on this. We need to talk about plasma. There are some relevant ethical issues, but I'm sure that putting together main actors and inviting Germany and Austria, which you know that in these nations, because there is a remunerated donation of plasma, I think from 25 to 50 euros, discuss openly. So we know that plasma goes beyond each regulation, because plasma regulates the market. And over the next few years, this market will be invasive more and more. We need to discuss this openly, and we need to find solutions together. But I think that we should set aside our ideologies and talk about plasma and find a solution at the European level. Because you know, most of plasma comes from Canada and United States, when everything is paid for, is remunerated. And I wish that in October and November, early next year, we will have this seminar in plasma. And again, I will be waiting for you on that occasion. And I would like to talk about, as for Europe, as for donations of male homosexuals in 18 states out of 27 prohibit donation of blood. It's prohibited for them donation. In some countries, this is prohibited up to 1 year after sexual intercourse. And we have 4 nations: Italy, Spain, Poland, where transfusion and where donations are only for heterosexual people. And this needs to be considered. Homosexual people can, the presence of homosexual people can be denied, and we need to reflect on this topic. We need to discuss and reflect together. So the topic of homosexuals, and also the topic of blood self-sufficiency in Europe. Western Europe is self-sufficient, but we have some European states where this is not the case. And I would say Bulgaria, we are 40. Albania, close to us, we are 30. Let's not forget that in Albania we have an association, we've been working a lot there. President, Italian origins, we supported them, we supported that association. They started from a critical situation. 80% of donors were remunerated, and over 10 years, thanks to our collaboration and help, we were able to achieve 30% of donors, volunteer donors, and we have the share of 60%, unfortunately, that are familiar. It seems like Latin America. If you think that 60% of family donation in Albania, this is quite surprising, and this needs to be food for thought for all of us. Politicians in Europe needs to reflect on this. What can fields give? If we work together with small, targeted projects, we can solve many issues. We can help these countries to evolve, to achieve self-sufficiency. Of course, this might, the Italian, French, German experience can be of help, Denmark, Netherlands, but we need to create small, targeted projects. They can be small ones, of course. With small projects, we can help them. I invited also national AVIS. Let's choose a country. Albania is close to us. Why don't you work with them? A small project, maybe. You'll see that we will achieve great results. And I can't stress this enough. The European community, policymakers need to look at those countries in a different way. We need to focus on those countries we need to improve, and the associations. Well, I asked the French, the German association to create small projects to help small nations and states to improve. All in this way will we be able to find a solution also in terms of European self-sufficiency. These are my reflections, which I wanted to share with you at the European level. And I hope you understand this, because if we help these small countries with small projects to help improve blood donation, it's a benefit for all of us. And then we will also deal with the issue of plasma. I know that it will be very tough, but we need to do that. We need to talk about these issues now. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Massaro, for talking about very relevant issues. We know that you have to leave us for a parallel commitment. But thank you very much. AVIS has a history of collaboration with similar projects that are always addressed to external countries, with external to Europe. This is a great input to ascertain, to consider better ways to collaborate in our continent and beyond our continent.
Turn to the institution which is at the very center of the ongoing process of revision of the EU discipline about the substances of human origin, so including blood, and that has launched a massive consultation with all the stakeholders involved in the field. So considering this, Dr. van der Spiegel, we are particularly grateful for the availability of the EU Commission to really listen to all the contributors like us. It is not something to be taken for granted. So really, thank you very much. Could you tell us more about the state of the art of the process, and perhaps share some preliminary guidelines and comment on how we can support a new era for blood collection in Europe?
Voilà. Now I'm unmuted, I think. Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
We do.
Thank you very much, Alice and Dr. Briola, and Avis, first of all, for giving me this opportunity to to be with you and listen and give some inputs into your discussion this evening. But also broader than that, thanks for your day-to-day work in Italy, and also for bringing that with the donors in Italy, and also to bringing that voice of the donors to the European debate, because I think AVIS really plays a central important role in there. And so I also want to take this occasion to thank you for that, because I think before going really into what we plan in the European system, it's important to correct sometimes what is a misunderstanding. Sometimes the whole system is presented as a pyramid when where the European Union is setting some rules, a framework that then in 27 countries authorities are implementing that, in particular on around 1,400 blood establishments across the European Union that are organizing the collection and the supply of blood and blood components. And then on that bottom of that pyramid, you often see those 50 million donors and those more than 25 million patients that receive blood transfusion. But I think the picture should actually be inverse. I think on top should be you and are you actually the donors and the patients that are providing for those therapies and are needing those therapies. And I think all the other levels of what they're doing, the establishments, they support you to be able to do that. The national authority supports the establishment to be able to do that in a safe way, and we try to support the national authority. So it's not just a pyramid top down. It's more, I think, an ice cream cone or something bottom up. And I think it's really important to underline the central role and the important role of the donors in all this. So I also wanted to start with a humble thank you to all the donors that you are representing, because of course without you there would be nothing to organize and no therapies possible. So on our supporting role, then what we are doing at EU level is basically two elements. We try to manage the policy on blood and safety and quality and availability and efficiency of supply. And within that, we also have a legal mandate where we can be a bit stronger. We can put requirements and that are requirements on safety and quality. So there's requirements really on the establishments across the EU to make sure they work well with the donors, have the right donors. They also process the blood in an appropriate way so that we really get safe and effective therapy for the patients. Then there's also requirements on CNS and the colleague authorities in the other countries to make sure that those blood establishments really organize their work in an appropriate, safe, qualitative way. And then there are requirements in the legislation on us as European Union Commission to support and to coordinate work with the establishments and with the authorities. In 2019, so 2 years ago, we have been evaluating that legal framework. So we assessed how it had been done. You should recall that the framework dates back to concerns of the 80s and the 90s when there was not so much awareness of some communicable diseases and as a consequence and management. As a consequence, there were a lot of recipients that were infected with diseases like HIV, hepatitis, Creutzfeldt-Jakob also. So all those concerns decided the member state to give the European Union a mandate to work on those safety quality rules. We have that framework in place since 2020, so quite a while, so it was appropriate to evaluate it. And the good finding, I think the positive outcome was that safety quality has improved a lot. There are no longer serious concerns like we had in the 80s, 90s. However, we also need to look forward, and we found a couple of shortcomings. There were 5 main shortcomings. I will not go through all of them, but there are a couple of shortcomings that need to be addressed if we want to ensure that the system remains safe. And the first one that which is from our perspective a major one, and important for the recipients, but also for the donors, is that some of the rules, which are often quite technical, are out of date. They're no longer fit. And I think Dr. Massaro just referred, for example, to the question of men having sex with men and their ability to be donors. I think there are rules there that are outdated, and there's much better ways to make sure that there can be safe donations also from men having sex with men. And I think there's something to learn there in the EU from some practices you have in Italy also. So that is just an example there, but there's many other rules, more technical, maybe a bit less related to ethical questions that needs updating. So for that, we are exploring different options now to see how we can improve that. I think one way that seems to be coming forward is to work with expert bodies like the European Centre of Disease Control in Stockholm, or like the European Department on Quality of Medicines, part of the Council of Europe, to get updated rules and keep them up to date. So that's an approach that we are actively exploring. Then another major issue that came out as a concern was indeed our supply dependency in the EU. We are not having sufficient, in particular, plasma. I think the situation is different for whole blood and for plasma. For whole blood, I think we are well supplying our patients across the hospitals in Europe who need that with the blood services, thanks to the donations of donors. And I think also we have seen during the COVID crisis that those systems are quite strong and resilient. We have hardly got shortages of those components, and thanks a lot there again to donors who stayed committed also in those difficult times to provide sufficient whole blood. The second, of course, the part of our subsector that we are regulated with the blood system is plasma that is collected to manufacture medicinal products for patients with clotting diseases, with immune diseases. And there we have another situation. We have an increasing need. We see that in the EU, we are unable to sufficiently collect plasma. And for that, we are indeed, for a big part, dependent on imports from plasma from the US. That is a situation that, from a political point of view, is of course maybe not preferred by the EU policymakers, but also a situation that makes us a bit vulnerable for supply disruptions. And we have seen that, unfortunately, in the COVID situation, in the context. We are seeing that there's several countries who are reporting that there's reduced supplies or interruptions in supplies by the companies who provide those plasma-derived medicinal products. So COVID here really has confirmed there is an issue and that we need to tackle that issue. And of course, there's different sectors active here. There's private sectors, public sectors. They are both playing their role, I think, in the supply. But what we see in the most countries, like in Italy, that it's really a role for the public sector to collect that plasma, and that there also is a need for supporting them to do that. And I think we've tried to do that also in the COVID context with collecting and providing more support for collection capacity of plasmapheresis equipment. I think in Italy in particular, there are a lot of establishments who got European Union support to do that. It is, of course, in the context of plasma that is valuable or for some groups of patients to be, like immune suppressed patients, to be treated with to protect them from COVID. But of course, this capacity has also more structural possibility to increase our own EU supply and to become a bit less dependent from import. And that being said, the real full increase of plasma for the EU will require much more actions than this one. It will require actions across the chain from donors, collectors, manufacturers to the doctors who prescribe and the patients who need. It will require actions at the level of that chain. It will require action at the level of authorities, national oversight and coordination at the EU level maybe also. So there's a whole bunch of measures, and I think with the EDPM there we have a kind of an overview of a plan of action of all the things to be done. In there's also a role for strengthening legislation and some measures, in particular to get good monitoring and view on and have preparedness plans if there are shortages. So that brings me back to the legislation, because there's, I think, a third element that I want to, maybe, sorry, still on this first, I think an important element there will be collaboration. As Dr. Massar just pointed to, I think there is need for, there's a lot that we don't have to reinvent in terms of knowledge on how to improve that situation. There are some countries who are doing this already very well, and some services, and there's a lot of value in sharing that knowledge, identifying that knowledge, writing it down and sharing it and bring it to all the countries so that every country can do its part. So that, I think, is something that we will do, and I think fortunately there's increased possibilities now at the EU level with the EU for Health that might be explored there. And then to end, I think back to the legislation, I think there's a third shortcoming that was identified, which I think is key. And again, that's why I think the donors are really at the heart of everything. What we identified as a shortcoming is that there are not sufficient rules in the EU legislation to protect the donors, because if we are relying on donors, if we want to continue relying on donors, if we want to maybe ask more from donors to make sure that we have a more sufficient supply in the EU, then the first precondition is to make sure that donors can trust that they can do this in a way that is healthy and that is not risky for themselves. And I think that is exactly one of the key objectives that we are aiming for with this new legislation, to have good rules in there to make sure donors are protected, their own health is monitored, that they're followed up when that is needed. So that are a bit the plans we are having with the new legislation.
Wow.
We are currently, as you said, Alicia, we did an extensive consultation. We run quite some workshops also to make sure we have all the views on board. We are currently doing a study, and I think that our overall aim is by the end of the year to come with a new proposal for discussion. But then, as Simona Bonafé said, we are only making the proposal. The real co-legislation in the end are the European Parliament and the Council. So there's a whole process still to go there. So it will still take a bit of time, but I maybe somewhere in 22 we could hope we have that new legislation ready. So that's from my side what I wanted to tell you today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we will, of course, support you for every step of the way. And really, thank you for sharing the insights from the Commission. I think it is very relevant for us, for our audience, to get to know the work of the EU Commission. And so it was really interesting. I come
Pleasure.
back to Italian per dire che infine come parte essenziale di quella che è la nostra posizione.
Let's go back to Italian to say that at the end of the day, what is important in terms of donations, human rights, promotion of human rights for donors and for receivers of our blood. This rights needs to be protected on equal basis. And under this perspective, we believe that Mr. Montrosio has a unique perspective in terms of the organizational aspects that are involved in our work for reaching self-sufficiency. So, Mr. Montratio, would you like to share the most relevant initiatives? Thank you a lot for inviting me. Thank you, Mr. Simonetti. Thank you, Mr. Piola, for bringing together in this debate a number of components that are essential. So the scientific, professional, the donor components, also the institutional one, and I will also say the political one. And I would like to thank Honorable Bonafé for being here, for participating in this important event that will lead to review that comes before the review at the European level. That being said, I would like to answer your question by bearing in mind the topic. Today we have a challenge and a goal, self-sufficiency, that needs to be interpreted in the sense of being able to guarantee to all those who are in need an adequate treatment in terms of blood products. So linking to the metaphor of the three-leg chair, the three-leg table, in my brief presentation, the three legs I would like to mention, I think would be on the one hand, the fact that we need to consider the importance of quality and safety of blood products, which is an essential leg. This is an extremely lucky moment after the period of the 80s and contamination of blood products and the uncertainty that we had back in the day, hepatitis C, HIV, and the unavailability of technology that allowed us to detect all of these aspects. This needs to serve as a lesson of a system that is extremely complex, the blood-derived components that is based on a series of steps, starting from the selection of donors, passing through a series of steps and testing of donation until administration to patients or goes towards the industry of blood components that introduces further safety steps. The second leg of this very complex system is the one related to the topic of self-sufficiency. Okay, we need to be realistic on this and quite objective. Self-sufficiency in many countries of the European Union is not far away, and we need to acknowledge the contribution of the systems in which donations are not remunerated is extremely important. We have an average coverage, roughly, of blood-derived products, also medicinal products, that cover for some products 100% roughly. For other products like immunoglobulin, we have a gap, there is a gap. We need to import plasma from United States, finished products from United States, and in many countries, this gap doesn't exceed 30% of need. And also in countries with non-remunerated systems, 70% of the need of immunoglobulins, in other cases even more, is covered. This is a challenge, and of course, this plays a crucial role for this kind of products and equal access to treatment. And in this sense, it is important to consider the third leg of the chair, of the table, after quality and self-sufficiency, is maintaining an ethical system. And in this perspective, the European Council is working with its tools European Council, it's a separated, independent body with respect to European Union, represents 47 member countries from the Russian Federation through Caucasian countries, the Balkans, and the European Unions, 47 countries together with health systems and political systems extremely different, which subscribed a common agreement, that is the Convention of Human Rights, so as to have fundamental human rights protected. Within this context, it is important to mention the Oviedo Convention, a key convention for the protection of human rights in the field of medicine, health, and biology. It is clear that if, on the one hand, developments of medicine and biology gives us give us the possibility to have future treatments that can do a lot, can help a lot. On the other hand, there is a risk of compromising some fundamental values that we can, for example, trace in some key principles mentioned in the Oviedo Convention, for example, no remuneration, non financial gain through selling body parts. And against this, against this background, there is still a great value at European level, the fact that countries, through their national legislation, stress this concept in order to avoid a situation in which donation of blood is obtained from the weaker components of our society, exploiting them to the benefit of the richer elements of our society. This is the key message of my speech, and I don't think I will steal further time because I think that the topic has been analyzed under different perspectives. The key message, the importance that this concept of non-financial gain that is explicitly mentioned Article 21 of the Oviedo Convention remains a fundamental pillar in all legislations and also in the European Union legislation that, by the way, receives Article 21 within the Fundamental Human Rights of the European Union, Article 3. This is an extremely important message. Another message that I would like to share with you, also taking advantage of the presence of Honorable Bonafé, is related to the importance that the Oviedo Convention concludes in other countries in which it hasn't been ratified its own legislative path. Italy has been working through the signature of the Oviedo Convention, has been working in launching, starting ratification process. It had already started, but for many reasons, this process was interrupted. The Oviedo Convention is a framework, is a structure that wants to protect fundamental rights. It doesn't, it is not mentioned in many debates that might be culturally conflictual across different countries, but establishes fundamental principles. And in this sense, I think that that's it for me, and I'm available to answer any questions. And I want to thank you. I'm curious to follow the rest of the debate.
Grazie mille, dottor Montrasio. È stato
Thank you very
davvero un
much, Mr.
completamento dolce ma
Montrasio.
necessario della nostra prospettiva che tende a volte a
Thank you
essere
for integrating
molto,
our
molto
perspective
tecnica.
that is quite
Quindi ci
technical
ha davvero ulteriormente ampliato il
oftentimes,
contesto
and it
delle
widened
idee.
the
Io
our
sto notando che
perspective
ci sono
a
commenti da
lot.
parte del
I
pubblico e
was
ve ne
checking
segnalo
whether there are
un
comments
paio.
by the public, and I want to mention quite a few. So a comment related to the intervention by Mr. Furian, in which they say that regional authorities need to have the services always filled with qualified nurses and personnel, of course. And another comment comes from Sardinia region, and they say that this summer emergency has been reported quite a lot, and it creates concern over the territory, for the services, and for the patients already. This is from Sardinia region. So this concern is already present, and there is a great sensitivity as for the topics that we mentioned, and a great understanding. If you want to add anything to conclude this seminar, I would like to give the floor to you once again, if you want to say something to conclude this afternoon. So if I may, I just would like to link up to what was said, what you said, before giving the floor to Honorable Bonafè. If we sum up Sardinia and Sicily, major islands, we sum up many problems of our country. We need to have a particular care in those areas. This, as a transfusional Italian network, we need to be present at all levels. We need to think that we need to monitor starting from yesterday, not from tomorrow. Otherwise, we might have problems. If we sum up these two islands, we have a representation of the major issues of our country. Sometimes figures doesn't say as words do. Maybe it is also an occasion to program, to plan a donation before summer. So maybe it's time to give our contribution during the season as well. If there are not further comments by our speakers, we can. If you want to say something, we are here. But I wanted to say that our time is nearly over. I want to thank again Honorable Bonafè for supporting and promoting this reflection, President Briola for mentioning the main tasks of our mission, all speakers for their contribution, and all of you who listen and watch this event. Our take-home message: an aware knowledge of our efforts, what we are doing in terms of sustainability, shared programming on the basis of the needs of patients who are the ultimate goal of our mission.
Thanks a lot, Alice. Thanks to all of you for this very nice series of events on the World Blood Donor Day occasion. Also to the colleagues in CNS.
Grazie, grazie davvero allora a voi tutti e sono certo che torneremo di nuovo.
Thank you a lot. Thank you very much, and I'm sure we will be able to talk maybe at a three-leg table, the metaphor that has been with us during this seminar. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.